We have arrived. This is Webb Parton, your host, and we welcome you to the Free Range Dogs podcast. This is a place where we stake out a shady spot and talk about all things dog. Find yourself a soft piece of grass, spin a few circles, plop down, rest your feet, and join us in this joyful conversation. Hi, this is Webb Parton with Free Range Dogs podcast, and we have a good conversation today. We're going to be visiting with Kent and Michelle Rischard, and we're going to be talking about their two Brittany kids, Reba and Millie. Our age goes before you, so we'll say Millie and Reba. Okay. And we're going to talk about snake bite. You know, a lot of folks fear that happening, and they don't understand what that looks like or what form it takes. And Michelle and Kent have an interesting story to tell us. And so, and there's going to be some lessons in there as well. And so I thought it would be a good conversation to have. Let me have you introduce yourself. Michelle, say hello to folks.
Hello.
And Kent.
Good afternoon.
All righty. You have had the profoundly unlucky experience of having a dog snake bit. And then it was compounded because you had a dog get hit and you took him in, whole catastrophe. You go visit the vet, anti-venin, I'm presuming, the whole 9 yards. And you bring the kid home and you kind of love him up and get them back on their feet. And then lo and behold, a week later, you couldn't find the snake. Snake was gone. A week later, you cut both of them loose out in the yard. And they both come back in bit. And you get to go to the vet office again. And yeah. Describe how that happened.
Well, we had spent the weekend at a friend's house. It was Labor Day weekend. And what the interesting part is Sunday evening, I happened to go out into their backyard to collect up Reba. And I see a rattlesnake in their yard. So I collect up Reba, scurry back into the house, let them know so they can deal with it. We come home Monday and we let the dogs out in the backyard as soon as we get home. And Millie just makes a beeline for the house and just gets in the house and just starts vomiting profusely. And at first we thought, did she get a Colorado river toad? We didn't see a bite.
Yeah, you don't initially.
So we started cleaning her mouth.
Yeah.
And then we noticed the bites.
So we took her outside. I knew where the hose was, the spigot. I knew right where to go. I'd been told by others who lived here, this is what you do. You do the rinse and wipe and rinse and wipe. So I'm rinsing and wiping and rinsing and wiping, and it's starting to get dark. So we know that we need to get her back in the house. So I get her back in the house. Michelle takes a good look at her. I don't have my readers on at the time. And she noticed that Millie had been struck. And so immediately we go into, we've got to get her to the vet. Michelle reaches out to our vet, who happens to be a friend of ours, and she says, take him to the emergency room, the emergency vet. While Michelle is getting Millie ready to go, I go outside to look for the rattlesnake. And I'm just going to do a cursory because I know I need to get moving. And since it's dark and it's about 8 o'clock, I think, at this time, I knew that I was going to take Millie to the vet. I wasn't going to send Michelle down there. So we go. I don't find the rattlesnake. I did notice that Millie had defecated and vomited outside too. So this was like the minute she was struck, or second, it seemed like she had this violent reaction to it. And I'm still starting to piece together to me at that time. So I take Millie to the vet. It's Labor Day evening. They're unfortunately short-staffed, and lots of animals are there already. I'm not the only snake bite. And while I'm sitting there waiting, I find out, another couple comes in with a snake bite, and I think there were 2 phone calls in about snake bites. And I don't know that they came to the vet or not. But we were told, her platelet count was low. Anti-venin was the recommendation. They, of course, told me the price. And Millie is Michelle's dog. I bought Millie for Michelle for her birthday. And it's like, well, I got to bring this dog home alive. regardless.
Always preferable.
So here's my credit card. We're going to make this happen. And I was a little shell-shocked about the price. I wasn't quite prepared for that. But we got through it. Millie stayed there until about 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up. They told me to go home. So I woke up a little bit after 2. I called down and I said, how's my dog? How's my wife's dog? But I said, how's Millie? And the young lady there said, you can come pick her up. They recommended keeping her for observation, but they were so short-staffed. And I knew what we were going to do. Millie was going to be right next to us for the next day as we observed, and then we were going to do a follow-on to our vet for blood work. So we got through that process. It was shocking to me just how fast Millie reacted to it. And then we were told that, by our vet, it was probably better that she got struck on the face. Just, you're not hitting muscle mass. You're not hitting, an artery or vein. So I wouldn't say we were lucky, but we were probably fortunate.
Yeah. And, the 3 points you brought up that I know are confusing to folks. So the first thing is, how do you know if your dog's been hit? Because you see something happen and often you hear a yip and the way venom affects an animal is it attacks the red blood cells. It destroys the blood's ability to clot. And you will see in pretty short order swelling develop. So it's about half of a jawbreaker size that will come up at the site of the bite, or the injection, I should say. And then, depending on the severity of the envenomation, you'll see 2 dots of blood.
Yes.
And it's not really blood. It's sort of a watery, thin red serum. And that's blood that can't clot. Okay. And when you see that, then you know you have a problem. And so, you see a dog go by a snake. You're in the field, you're on a walk, you're hunting, whatever. And the dog yip and jumps up. And I've done it in the field. I've had my dogs run by a snake and you see a snake launch. And pull the dog in and you start feeling for a lump, a swelled portion. And once that swelling starts, then you should be able to start picking up that red stain. Okay. That's the first way you can tell. Now, anti-venin it's not a magic thing, and folks will say, well, I'll just keep it in the refrigerator, or, I'll have some up on the shelf. It doesn't work that way. It's pretty dangerous stuff for a dog, and it has to be done through an IV.
Correct. And
it goes in slowly so the dog doesn't go into shock, and it requires veterinary intervention. There's no way around that. And it hurts that when you get the bill, it hurts. And it really is a judgment call because, it hurts. And the truth is that most dogs that are bitten are never treated and survive with no ill effect. That's the truth. Some die because of that. But there's a lot of variable involved with a snake bite. A snake can control the amount of venom and the toxicity level of the venom. So it can be just a pass and swipe and, little to no venom injected, no foul, no harm. Or it could be that the snake thinks, oh, geez Louise, this thing's going to kill me, and just load the dog up. And, doesn't matter how much anti-venin you put in, it's a bad hit in a bad place. And the third thing was that, a face is a good place to get hit.
Yes.
And most folks don't think about that. We tend to internalize how we would react. And you got hit in the face by a snake, you'd have definite feelings about that.
Oh, yes.
But the truth is that there's very little arterial flow
Yes.
in the dog's muzzle or dog's nose. And in terms of the mass of swelling that comes in, if a place has to swell, that's not a bad place. It has somewhere to go. So about all you can do is make a decision. Are you going to the vet or you're not? If you're going to the vet, then get there and they'll do the blood work. Yes. They'll see how involved, the blood is in terms of that loss of clotting ability. And then they'll make a determination, do we need to use anti-venin or not? Maybe 1 vial, maybe 2 vials, maybe 3 vials. And it seems, every vial has a price tag on it. So it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I was hoping to get by with just 1 vial, which we did. Mm-hmm. The timing, and Millie had really, her face had swollen up. I wouldn't say twice the swell, but it was very significant. And I wasn't willing to roll the dice. As I said, it's Michelle's dog. And the other part was, I can afford this one. Didn't realize I was going to have a second one. There's areas in the budget. We'll just make some adjustments. And, I think I will admit that both Millie and Reba, even though we do hunt, they're mostly companions. Mm-hmm. And that's just my view was, all right, that's your recommendation as a professional, as a vet. I'll do this, and then we'll see how it works out.
Yeah. And we probably should introduce Millie and Reba. We're talking about 2 Brittany's.
That is correct.
And Millie's age?
She will be 5.
Okay.
In July.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Reba will be 4 in June.
Okay, so they're very close then. Okay.
Well, Michelle had a dog for a year. I thought it was time for me to step up and get my own. I got the small one.
Yeah. Well, Brittany's are precocious.
Yes.
Okay, and they tend to get into stuff.
Oh, yes.
And so if there's mischief to be had, there's often a Brit. I know when I was training, we would take in a group of dogs, for every 3 months we'd have a new class, that'd be 10 dogs. And there'd often be 1 or 2 or 3 Brits. And first thing I would do is put collars around the dogs' necks with my name tag on it and my phone number, brass tag. And invariably, every few classes, 1 Brit would come in whose sheer joy in life was to chew the collars off of every other dog in the yard.
Not surprised.
Yeah. And it was always a Brit. Always a Brit. Yeah.
I hunted over my brother's GSP for a number of years. And when we moved to Pennsylvania, I just thought, well, I'm going to get GSP. I just have to have a GSP. And then I found out that hunting up there was primarily on a preserve, and a dog really didn't make sense with my travel schedule. So we moved here. We had lost a dog, a dachshund, and right before we moved out, Michelle was doing some research on what she wanted. And I'm going to get me a GSP. And one day I came home and she says, I'm going to get a Brittany. I want a Brittany. I'm like, oh, okay. So I did a little research. Versatile hunting dog. I knew that. Found a little more information about it. So a week later, Michelle goes, a friend of ours has a friend who has a litter. I'm like, oh, geez, this is happening awful fast. And, does a dog even hunt? So it turns out, in checking with some other people, yes, they had Brittany's that really hunted well. They were good hunters. This dog was going to hunt. So I had to retract on a few of my initial thoughts, and we pressed forward, and we haven't looked back.
Nope.
And then when I saw the size versus a GSP, and we have our dogs in the house, it's like, I'm not a big running hunter anymore at my age. A dog that hunts a little closer, it kind of makes a lot of sense, So it's worked out pretty well. We don't know what the next one will be, but we'll see how this goes.
Yeah. Well, you had the full calamity because Millie went out, she got hit.
Yep.
And then, of course, the best way to never see a rattlesnake is to be looking for one.
Which we did.
That is the truth.
Right? And there's only one thing worse than seeing a rattlesnake, and that's seeing a rattlesnake and then not seeing a rattlesnake. And so Millie got hit and you couldn't find that snake.
No, that's correct.
And then you probably watched for a few days, keep trying.
A week.
Yeah, we tore out. We had a lot of ornamental flowers and some lantana and some other things, and we did some pretty severe landscaping to our backyard, which is enclosed. I do know, I have a very good idea where the snake came in. We have 2 gates, and one gate had a gap. Once I saw the snake, when I found it a week later, I realized its entry point. Now, I had shut down its entry point in between. Maybe a mistake, possibly not. I know where my big mistake was, is that we have 2 aloe vera plants in our backyard. And what we said was we wanted to be able to see around all of our vegetation. We didn't want something underneath it. I didn't think about, what about in it? So I didn't look down in the aloe vera to realize they're just a bunch of little clumps, and there's a perfect little nest in there, which is where that snake spent the next week. Because even at night, when they needed to go out, we patrolled the yard with flashlights, and we were out with them for a solid week. And that's why they were bit 7 days, a week later, Monday to a Monday, because we thought, wrongly, we're past this. And it was another case that I was somewhere else in the house, and Michelle had let them both out. The screaming began, and I realized I need to hustle. And I probably have to leave this to Michelle because I don't have any idea what led up to it.
Well, them being Brittany's, they're always getting into trouble and getting into the bushes. And I just happened to look outside, and Reba was running back to the house, and Millie jumped. And they were by the aloe plant. So I get them in the house, and I immediately run to the aloe plant. And when I looked down in it, I saw it moving. So at that point, Kent came out, and I'm like, I found it. It's in the aloe plant. I need to go check on Reba. I said, because she immediately ran into the house and jumped in her crate. And sure enough, bite on the face. So I got her geared up. I didn't see anything on Millie. So I load up Reba, head down to the emergency vet. In the meantime, Kent has destroyed the aloe plant and that snake.
And I was shocked at its size. If it was 12 inches, I'd be surprised.
Also,
it had no rattle.
Thing. Yeah, little thing. Yeah.
It was just a real little snake.
Yeah.
I'm used to much larger, 3 to 4 feet. This just really surprised me. And I took that shovel to the aloe plant till I found it. Mm-hmm. And then I dispatched the rattlesnake. And then I came back in and I looked at Millie. I put my readers on, and I realized she'd been struck. Now, Michelle had already left. She's already down at the vet. And I'm thinking, all right, Millie's had her anti-venom. It's only been a week. I know there's some time. There's this window, but I'm not going to chance it. So load up the other kennel, load up the car, and we're off to the vet. So now we have 2 of them there. So the 4 of us are spending the afternoon in the vet. They have a really nice location, but not what I thought I would be doing. And the blood test on Reba and platelet count led to, all right, this is the same boat we were in with Millie. We had a good outcome. Why would I do something different? Millie's test came back, and it's like, I think her platelets are not rebounded yet. We're going to observe her. We're not leaving until we take Reba home. We're just going to sit here with Millie, and I'm going to keep an eye on her. And if I see a change, then we're going to have to make a course adjustment. But Millie, it turned out okay. She was fine. And we've done a little research on rattlesnakes, the amount of time for it to reload venom, the size of that rattlesnake. So we felt pretty good about the decision about not doing anti-venom for Millie again. But I would tell you that what crossed through my mind was what model of Beretta shotgun I could have bought after 2 visits to the vet.
And the shotgun would have been so much easier than a shovel to destroy that plant.
That is, yeah. Well, I can't find shells. So.
Well, because folks don't realize how tiny a baby rattlesnake is, and they're born alive.
Yes.
And we've had several litters of snakes with the snakes I keep. and I might have told the story already, but I know Nick is, my wife Nicole is she's a retired school counselor now, but she's kind of like the Easter Bunny, sweetness and light. And we had gone to a friend's house, and they had a group of dogs that they needed done, their own. And so we were going over for a barbecue, and I said, well, I'll bring Snakes with me, and we can do some training, do a session before the barbecue. So we arrived early afternoon, we did the work, and then we broke and we sat down and, enjoyed a social period of time and barbecue, and got home hours later. And I brought I brought a Diamondback and a Mojave with me, and they were in a large, half-size trash can, big. So I get home and I go to transfer them back into their habitats that they live in, and I open the lid, and there's all kinds of little baby rattlesnakes in there with them. Wow. And what had happened is the female had given birth, the female Diamondback had given birth, and there was, I don't know how many, 12, 14, 16. I mean, and the thing is, they're just so cute. I mean, they're about as big as a pencil in diameter and maybe just a shade longer, but fully formed, fully marking. They only have one little button, so there's no noise. Okay. So I see this, and I go in and I tell Nicole, I said, babe, you're a grandmother. And she gets this look of horror on her face because she doesn't know what I'm talking about, but it can't be good, right? She says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, the snake had a litter, and we got a whole bunch of little ones, And I said, and they're so cute. And she gets this look of horror on her face, and she says, kill them all right now.
I'm with her.
She figured if I got them named, it would be too late, right?
Well, I named the one that I killed.
Yeah. Well, you hear so much on the internet, Dr. Google. And one of the truisms that you hear is that a small snake is much more dangerous than a bigger snake because they just give a full bite and they can't. The truth is that the head of a small baby rattlesnake is about the size of the end of your pinky,
yes,
if not smaller. And the two venom glands that comprise that entire structure, the head of that little snake, are minute compared to one single venom gland in an adult Diamondback. So, I mean, if there's no such thing as a good snake bite, but if I was going to have to sustain a snake bite, I'd much rather it came from a neonate than an adult snake that's going to really load me up with venom, The difficult part of those small snakes is you can't hardly keep them out of a place. Even if you snake-proof your yard by using hardware cloth and hard structure all the way around and try and keep them out, just little weep holes between cinder block they'll get through. And they are invisible, and they don't make a sound.
No, this one did not, and even though we had spent a whole week of patrolling the yard, day and night, we never saw that snake out. And I think once it struck and got into the aloe plant, it was comfortable. It had a good place to be, and the dogs were out around it. And I did do the hardware mesh. I have done that, but I realized once they got struck twice, especially Millie twice, she's not afraid of snakes, or she's not associated that that's what the problem is. And I had made a decision. I have a number of friends who have hunting dogs, and they never did snake aversion training. And I had a number of people who have dogs that have talked about it. And my neighbor has had his dog snake trained, and I had put it off because what I had read about the snake training and heard about the snake training, a 30-minute session, you have to come back every year. In my mind, I could not rationalize that was training. I always thought, well, that's shock therapy. And I do use a training collar on my dogs, but I don't use it to train them. I use it to reinforce commands that I know they know. That's just the way I've approached it. But I knew when they got struck that either we're going to be attached to them day and night. They're not going to be able to live the life of a dog if I don't do something. And my brother has GSP, and he had his dog, Abby, trained by you. Mm-hmm. And I was looking for somebody to train, and my brother called me and explained the process. He didn't give it all the details, but he went through your approach to it. I said, that's training. So I said, send me the contact information. And I reached out to you last fall, and then Michelle had her deer hunt. I had my deer hunt. I went duck hunting. All the things that got in the way. But I kept it on my to-do list on my desk. And then in the spring, I said, I've got to get on this. I have to call Webb because we cannot trust them around a rattlesnake. And I cannot, it would be hard for me to go back to the vet again and pay that amount of money. It's not just paying the money. It's, as a dog owner, why haven't you learned? Mm-hmm. You have to do something to help your dog. Mm-hmm. And then we went through the training, and it all, like I said, when my brother gave the overview, that makes sense to me about training. And then I think the experience was phenomenal. I think we probably learned, and Michelle and I have talked about this quite a bit since the training. I think we learned as much as Millie and Reba did, to be quite honest.
Well, I make a point of trying to, because it's a package deal. Truth is, I've always worked for dogs. But dogs come with baggage. They have their humans that they want to bring along.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's true.
And so it's a package deal because both parts of that partnership, have pieces, need to know things and do things. So I make a point of trying to educate on both sides of the line.
Yeah, my feeling is that I'm a very amateur gun dog owner, and I wouldn't say a handler, but an owner, and I like to go out and hunt. But I do realize that I think they have more natural ability, and my job is to not interfere with their natural ability. And I think over time, and I've learned a lot from them, I do know that, if I give them a command, that's not an option. And don't give them a command when you know they're not going to follow it. So we've gone through that. And I think with the snake aversion training, I will not hesitate to have them in the field when I know the snakes will be out there. Because I think they'll let me know on the number of them that I've walked by. And we've spent enough time in the desert. We've seen them. We've seen rattlesnakes out in the wild. And it's just like, I've seen mountain lions 3 times. And people say you don't see mountain lions. Well, you spend enough time out and you're observant, you'll eventually see them.
Yeah. Well, let's fill in that last part of that, the last 2 hits, because you went through a conventional treatment for Millie on the first go around.
Correct.
And 2 or 3 days, the swellings went down. And what happens is, you get sloughing, you'll get ulcerations where the venom has created necrotic plugs, and then the stuff will turn to jelly and run out.
Yes.
And did you get all that wonderful? Sometimes it doesn't happen, or in lesser degrees. But did she have sloughing?
It was at the lesser degree side because we were worried about this. What's it going to do to her face? What's it going to do to her ability to hunt, to be out, be active? So, obviously once she was struck, we did a lot more research on what can happen and what the outcome would be. But the swelling was significant. Obviously the impact of the drugs to give her the anti-venom and the whole process, it took her a good day to recover from that. We were very careful about not letting her jump, not let her do certain things. So her activity level was pared back for probably the next 4 or 5 days severely, which was hard for her. Mm-hmm. The first day she was fine with resting up, but after that she was back to being a Brittany. And she didn't understand why Reba was able to go in the backyard and run around, and she didn't get a chance to chase the lizards. But yeah, she had exhibited all the behaviors and what we thought we would get from a snake bite. We then were at the vet, and our vet had a other dog that had been bit in the hindquarters, and once we saw what that looked like, we were just so thankful that, if Millie was going to get struck on the nose.
Yeah. Did Reba have the same experience? Did you get sloughing with Reba?
No, the good thing was neither one of them. The swelling was tremendous. I mean, Reba's got a much smaller head than Millie, and then they were competing for head size. But no, the sloughing, the really detrimental long-term impact, we were fortunate that they did not suffer from that.
And it might have been a function of that small snake having loaded up Millie pretty good the first go around.
Yes.
And then you only had a week lag time in between. That there's no such thing as one snake bite. I mean, there's a pretty big variable. And so you got lucky in that on the second and third go around, the snake didn't do a lot of injecting.
I think we were lucky in the first time that Reba wasn't the one that was struck, and it was Millie. Millie being a bigger dog, she's her mentality, attitude's a little bit different. I mean, Reba, I think if she'd have been struck as hard and with as much venom as Millie, I mean, I think she might have had a little more lasting impact on her. Not her willingness to go after a snake, but just, what it would do to her face or, any long-term effects of it.
And, that's probably a valid point that we should make for folks, because people think that, oh, my dog's been bit, it's over. They know now. They won't go near a snake again. Boy, that's not the case. That's not what I've seen. And that was a pretty clear example with Millie and Reba, because when we brought both of those dogs in on the rattlesnake, they're going to bring it home.
Oh, yeah. They were going to get bit again if we didn't do the training, that's for sure.
Right. I watched how hard you had to hold the leash to keep her from getting from the snake.
Right.
And it was game on for both of them.
Right. And that's what's hard for folks to understand, because we humans, we intellectualize things. We think of process through and we go, X plus Y equals Z. And that's not the way a dog's mind works. It's acquire movement, go at it. That's how their mind functions.
Yeah, that was very, very evident. Not that anybody's told me once a dog gets bit that they learn from it. But it was clear that there was no learning from their first interactions with the rattlesnake. And I think if we had not done snake aversion training and gone through your class, they'd be bit again. Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind, as much time as we're out and about and we have rattlesnakes in our yard, not in our backyard, that was a first, but around our house all the time. And I let them, when I go to the workshop or I'm outside, I let them run with me. When Michelle walks them, she walks both dogs every morning. They're on a leash because of where we're at. But I watched Millie step over a rattlesnake a couple years ago. We were walking on a path, and I had her on a 20-foot lead, and I was letting her stay at the end of it. And all of a sudden, I see that she's on the other side of a 3-foot rattlesnake. So she's about 10 feet. So we've got half the lead, and I'm got 10 feet. And now I'm like, I can't call her back to me. I have to get her to stay exactly where she's at. And then I need to navigate around. And fortunately, she woke one of the few times. No, she's a good dog from that standpoint. But I gave her a firm whoa. And
she believed you.
She believed me. And then I maneuvered around that rattlesnake. So she didn't see it. She didn't smell it. Or if she smelled it, she didn't recognize it. That should have been a clue to me. But again, when I read about the type of training, not your training, I don't want a 30-minute shock therapy that I have to do every year, and then I'm not sure. Do they realize that they're being shocked because of the snake is there, or that I've got a pair of Roper cowboy boots on today?
Yeah, it's not so they don't. Yeah, you know, I've used an e-collar from the beginning. You know, I started training before there were e-collars, so I've watched that evolution. And it's not that I'm opposed to using higher levels of stimulation when it's warranted. And if the effect warrants it, I'm not opposed to doing that. But it just doesn't work. You know, and any time you use a very high level of stimulation with a dog, all learning stops. It becomes panic and flight. And that doesn't help you, because what the dog needs to do is learn and understand, not panic and run away. And, you know, that's hard for us people, because we just get in that human brain. We don't work stuff out very well. But we assume that a dog will understand things the way a human understands things. So if a human goes in and puts their hand inside a mousetrap and it snaps on their finger, they say, oh, I'm not going to put my hand in that mousetrap anymore. But that same dog will come in every time because they don't intellectualize things. You have about a second to make an association for a dog. About a second. And if there's more lag time than that, the consequence of an action isn't connected with the negative that comes from it. Okay. So, dog comes in on a snake. It looked interesting. Looked like it could be fun. Looked kind of squishy. Let's try it out. They go in, they grab it. It wiggles, it moves, it makes noise. Ooh, this is nice. And in that interaction, time or two, they feel the push, the snake hitting them, right? And 5 minutes later, after the adrenaline starts to wear off, and mom and dad, the killjoys that they are, have come out and taken their new toy away.
Absolutely.
Okay? Right. And they don't feel very good. They don't realize, they're still pouting over the fact you took their new toy away, and they don't realize what that new toy was and what it did to them. And so that's the issue. In college, I took a psychology class, and it was an early childhood development, and a professor made a statement to me that has stuck since that time. And he says, you know, when you're dealing with a child and they do something wrong and you're going to employ corporal punishment, if you don't do it the instant that they have done something wrong and you don't have to scrape them off the wall, it will have no lasting impact, which I don't think you should have to scrape your children off the wall. So corporal punishment's out. And I applied the same thing with dogs is, you know, they're not going to put those things together. And, you know, we've, from teaching a dog or changing their behavior, it's just more training. And then the shock collar, there's a place for it. I do use it when I'm training them, but I like to tone them and vibrate them. But if they get to a certain point, it's like, all right, you're going to get a little bit of a dose, and I find that they'll respond then. But I want to go through the tone. I want to go through the vibrate. All right, I don't want to do this, but it's coming. But they've obviously, if I spend more time with them, and that's the critical thing. That's the key. Yeah. Well, what did you learn from the whole experience?
Well, in your class, I found it very interesting because we had the golden retriever, which we thought was going to be the star pupil. Mm-hmm. And with him, it was the location of that snake because he didn't want to go near that mat. So he associated that geography, that location was bad. But then when you picked up and moved the snake to a new location, he went right up. So I found that to be incredibly interesting that, you know, you did take us through the different phases of the training. So, and it worked. I mean, because by the end of the class, none of them were getting any, even when it was in the burlap sack, the dogs were, no way I'm going near that smell.
Yeah. And that's the critical piece. it has to be smell. Has to be smell. Because they don't learn in that way. Their whole world is formulated on geography, on place. They live they inhabit a particular piece of ground, and they learn where the good places are and the bad places are, and they know what to avoid and where to find the things they need to survive. And we humans just don't think in that way. We just don't. So, I know when I'm doing training, it helps to break it down so that people can see it. And I recall that golden, and that's not uncommon for golden retrievers. And, you work with genetics when you work with different breeds of dogs.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. And, Goldens are very people-oriented. Mm-hmm. And typically a golden would walk through a fire with their human, where a Brit would stand at the edge and say,
"See ya.
We'll wait for you at the truck. Where'd you leave the keys?"
Oh no, they'll figure a way out to get into that, and then they'll tear up all the upholstery.
There you go. Right. That's what a Brit will do. So, it's, snakes are dangerous things. And snakes are much more common than people have any idea that they are. And they're in most of the country, the majority of the U.S. has some form of poisonous reptiles. And so it behooves you to be able to find a way to keep them safe. Because if they're looking on their own, you can't put a leash on a dog and keep them safe. Our eyes just don't work that well. Yeah. But a dog's nose, on the other hand, that does.
Yeah. It's very true you say that about the eyes, because I've had both Millie, when I've had them out walking, I've had both Millie and Reba go up and sniff a rattlesnake, and we've gotten the whole effect of it coiling up, it's shaking its rattle. Pretty scary.
Yeah. My experience has been with my field dogs when I was guiding, and those dogs had, they spent their life running open grass. And I don't know how many rattlesnakes they've come upon, They would become very pragmatic, and you'd see them go in and smell a thing and just drift away from it. They weren't interested in being there because obviously there's no quail there. So if that spot isn't where I need to be, then I'm just going to go over that next little piece of highland and push that section of grass. And so if a dog has had that experience, it's amazing how pragmatic they can be, how intentional they can be. And they will tell you if they've been trained properly. They will tell you.
It was interesting when I was walking Millie this morning. I actually got to the end of the dirt road, and then there's a path that continues on. Well, Millie stopped at the end of the dirt road, so I don't know if she sensed something but she just wanted to turn around and come back home. So that's what we did.
I was doing a training about a month and a half ago, and this was in Gold Canyon, up East Valley in Phoenix. Yeah. And there was a gentleman there, and it was a larger group. There might have been 8 dogs there. And it was a retirement or an RV community where folks would come in and they'd stay the winter there. And so this man sits down, and I have all my folks laid out, and he, unsolicited by me, we begin. I introduce myself. I start talking, and he says, "Hey," I got to say something. And he turns to the people and he says, "This really works." And he said, and he's got his dog beside him, and he said, "I brought this dog because we had our other dog trained a year and a half ago. Webb had been here and did a training, and he said, we're out on a walk, and I'm not paying attention." And we're walking along, the dog's in front of me off lead, and the dog goes along and just stops. And I walk up to it, and I'm walking by it, and the dog won't move. And I looked at him, I said, "Hey, what's wrong? Let's go. Come on." And I tap him, "Come on, let's go." And I step off and give him the wiggle of the fingers, and the dog takes about a half a step, and his eyes are looking up, and it makes eye contact again. And the guy, 2 or 3 steps, and the dog hasn't moved.
Smart dog.
And he turns around, and he goes back and says, hey, what's wrong? And he's thinking, well, something's happened. The dog's hurt. When he looks at it, come on, hey, let's go. Come on. He steps up and he takes about 2 or 3 steps, and the dog just runs at him and pushes him, and then turn around and leaves. Yeah. Just, hey, dummy.
Don't go in there.
Don't go forward. Stop there. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're looking for, and I think that's what we're going to find. And I think, I've seen them point quail. When there's no way quail could be there. 3 other dogs have gone through there. 2 hunters have gone through there. And then circle back around, and Reba's got her nose in a little thicket, and she's not going to give up. And it's like, all right. And so I release her, and sure enough, up pops a quail.
Always trust the dog. Yeah.
That's my plan.
Yeah. Always trust the dog. Well, so is there anything you would have done differently after you've gone through that experience with the vet treatments and those sorts of things? You were comfortable. Your vet laid out a program. The program worked. Any afterthought wisdom?
Well, I mean, I mentioned that I think I could have done a little. Yeah. Well, one training. Yeah. One was definitely. I should have done a lot more research early on instead of just going, I think the dogs will figure it out. They're good. They're well-bred. They're smart. They're good hunting dogs. That was definitely a mistake. The other part of it was, snake proofing. We've had a number of people in our backyard go, oh man, this is really good. It's all enclosed. Well, I should have really taken the time to look through, okay, how big a snake could fit through that hole, because we have multiple sizes around here. I've seen them in all different sizes. So that was a big thing. I really should have done more work on snake proofing the backyard. But bottom line is the training, because I think if they had been trained properly and early, I think they would have alerted to us that we had a rattlesnake in the backyard, and I would have known enough to trust them, and we would have tore every plant apart until we found it.
Yeah. I get all kinds of phone calls, from people telling me stories or emailing me stories or text messages, whatever. I recall one guy said he had gone, I trained 2, I think they were German dogs, short hairs, and he was going to go fishing, and his boat was parked around back. So he had cut his 2 dogs loose, and he went to the front of their house, and he opened the door. He loaded the dogs. He gets in the driver's seat. He proceeds to back in, to move out and then back up, and he's going to hitch up the trailer, hook the boat up. And typically he would stop the vehicle and he'd open the door and he'd let the dogs out first. They'd go over the top of him, bail out, and then he would step out. Well, he, hooks, backs it up, and he's where he needs to be, and he stops, and he opens the door of the truck. 2 dogs, that automatic sort of affect. Yeah. Shoot, they're going to go. And the first dog goes right to the edge and stops. And goes to push, come on, and the dog backs up. And the second dog comes and stops. Okay. And he thinks, what the heck is going on? He looks down, there's a coiled rattlesnake right down on the road, on the dirt below him. If they get that scent cue, they'll tell you. They'll let you know. Yeah, their noses. I was sitting in a train station. I'd missed a train. We were on the East Coast, and so they were running a video loop, and it was a video loop of how they train the dogs to find contraband and mostly bombs. Something explosive on an Amtrak train. And it resonated when the person said, when a human walks into the house and smells stew, they smell stew. When a dog walks in, they smell the meat. They smell the tomatoes. They smell every single ingredient that's in that stew. And that's why I will, when it comes to smelling something, I'm going to trust dogs.
I've done enough times where I've said, there's no quail here, and then up they come. That, I don't have to do that once or twice. Now I figured it out. And their ability to nose things is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what we see. They're always working their noses. Their ability to breathe in, breathe out, and I can tell when they're really getting after it. So if they don't want to jump out of the vehicle, I'm like, all right, we'll pull forward and get out of the way. Michelle, as I said, she walks every day, most every day. And she actually was walking up on the state line that's past us and came across another couple who routinely walk, and they have dogs. And the man was struck, and he spent 3 days in the hospital, 3 days in intensive care.
Yeah.
So I think it's having dogs that are trained to identify rattlesnakes. It's for their benefit, and I'm thinking, I'm getting a little out of this myself.
Yeah. And you recall the story on how he got hit. Was he interacting, handling the snake?
Nope. As a matter of fact, they were coming back from their walk, and they were parked up at the end of the road, and he believes that it was in the shade, and he probably stepped on it when he was getting ready to get in the vehicle and got him right on the ankle.
Okay.
And, he said he spent 3 days in the ICU.
Yeah. Yeah, snake bite's a serious thing. Real serious thing. And as bad as it is at the veterinary clinic.
Oh, I saw the bill for a human in the news just last week.
Yeah.
And I came out of the pharmaceutical industry, so did Michelle. When we lived in Florida, and when the hurricanes would happen in the southeast or up and down the East Coast, hospitals always build a kit. We know if they get to a hurricane warning that we're going to ship this set of pharmaceuticals to deal with the after effect of a hurricane. And in Florida and in Georgia and even up to the Carolinas, anti-venom is always part of that. Mm-hmm. And so I know how expensive it is, and I know how it has to be handled, the cold chain that goes with it. So it's, in most cases, the product would come back to us, which was always good when anti-venom. It means nobody was struck or hurt. But I mean, a lot of times it would happen. I mean, you put all that water, now you have snakes everywhere. It's a much different environment. I mean, here, we're very fortunate that we have open area behind us. We know it's full of, we know there's rattlesnakes. We know there's all types of snakes, mule deer, javelina, and we like that. Not that I'm going to chase down every rattlesnake that I ever find, but, I do have a very big distaste for them, for not only what happened to my dogs, but what happened in my pocketbook. But, I mean, it's a reality. We live in a space, and I think we need to be prepared for what's around us, because what's around us is not going to change. And if we think we're going to be changing nature, it's not going to happen. And we're not going to give up camping. We're not going to give up hunting. We're not going to give those things up. We want to be able to interact. I could share a bear story from last year, so I've learned a couple lessons recently. That was expensive because it just tore up the tent. Had to do a lot of sewing. But okay, so now when we're in bear country, we're going to have bear spray. We're going to do certain things that we didn't necessarily do before. But, we moved back to Arizona for a reason. But I do realize, 13 species of rattlesnakes in Arizona? Yeah. So there's no shortage.
No. We are blessed here.
Yes. Okay. That's your choice of word. But I think that's along the Texas line of bless your heart.
Yeah. I had a friend whose comment was that you live with the wildlife.
Yes.
You live with the wildlife. So. Yeah.
But there's such cool wildlife too. We've got Gila monsters, that we see every year out in the yard. So it's really.
So what will Millie and Reba's reaction be to a Gila monster?
Because it hisses and it has a similar kind of, they tend to freeze like a snake, and they'll get rigid, and you'll see them, and they'll put their back away so that you're facing the front of the Gila monster, and then they open their mouth, they hiss. Okay. And that's probably going to, they're going to have the same sort of reaction as if it was a snake. They won't, the smell has to be different.
Right.
But they'll probably have enough time, the wheels will start clicking and they'll probably go, well, this may not be a good idea. Okay.
Yeah, we've done some more to snake-proof our backyard, but we've also Gila monster-proofed it. Before we had the dogs, we would have, for whatever reason, there's a pair. One night we were sitting out eating dinner. We see one Gila monster 10 feet away.
Right.
That's fine. You're fine. We'll have dinner, and we'll stay away from you. And I came in and came out, and I was like, I can't believe a Gila monster can move that far that fast. And then I look back to where the original one was. We have a pair of them. And then they managed to get together, and we're like, okay, the lights are out. We'll leave you alone. But tomorrow morning, I'm moving you out of the backyard. But we should expect to see them soon. I don't know enough about it. It seems like they get out of a territory and they return to it.
Yeah, they spend most of their life underground. Yeah. They're kind of reclusive, Gila monsters. You'll see them, there's a pretty brief window of time, during the before the monsoons, through the monsoons, the Gila monsters will be out. And they just seem to be going somewhere. Yeah.
Well, we've seen them every year we've been here.
That's a real blessing. That's unusual.
That's how we look at it. We used to have a snapping turtle when we were in Pennsylvania. And I think her sequence was either every 2 or 3 years. But there was a farm pond behind our house, and that's where she went to lay her eggs. And then in the spring, we had to know when that occurred because we couldn't mow the yard until all the babies had moved their way through.
Right.
But we had a perfect, it was a compost pile that I had started, and the snappers thought, wow, what a great place to leave my eggs.
Right. It's all wildlife habitat.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good conversation, and I want to thank you for sharing. And most folks kind of panic, but if you do get a dog bit, it's probably going to be okay. You just need to take a deep breath, head toward the veterinarian clinic, bring your credit card with you.
Yes.
And
maybe 2.
It is not the end of the world. It is very unusual for a dog to die. And we're talking about medium to large sized dogs. Yes. Little guys don't fare as well. But that is what it is. So just know that there's stuff you can do to preclude bad stuff happening, which you should do before the fact, because once it's done, it's done. And just know that worst case scenario, you're probably not going to lose the dog. Right. You're going to lose some sleep. You're going to feel it financially for a bit, but it should be okay. Yeah,
I think that's certainly, I would go back to the biggest mistake was not getting the training early. If we have another dog, and I'm sure we will, when that dog is 6 months, we're going to get snake aversion training.
Yeah, I can fix it for you.
We're looking forward to that. Michelle talks every day about another dog.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
A friend just had a litter of GSPs, and now this is 2 litters now, right? Mm-hmm. And we've managed to get out of that without getting one of those puppies.
Not for lack of trying.
Have you held it in your hand, though?
Absolutely not. Okay. Nobody.
You see, that's the real test. You hold it in your hand, you bring it up alongside your heart, and that smell of a baby puppy, and they'll turn to you, when their eyes aren't open yet, and they have that sort of big mouth that opens up, and it has that sort of smell that it's just, you can't find it anywhere else. Now, if you can put that puppy back down.
That was Millie. Michelle said, well, we're just going to go look at the dog. And I was getting the kennel out. We had a kennel from our last dog. And I said, nobody goes to look at a puppy. If we're going to load up the vehicle and drive up there, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're coming back with a puppy.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah. And it was a good thing to do, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, this is Webb Parton. I want to sign off at freerangedogs.com. We've had a great time with Kent and Michelle, and Reba and Millie are sleeping in the back. They've not been privy to the conversation. Hopefully there will not be a engagement with the rattlesnake. Do let me know if I can help you. And I'm always available. You can go on the website, hit the subscribe button. That really helps us. I do look forward to these conversations with folks, and I look forward to being able to help people through these conversations. And I look forward to visiting with you again. This is Webb Parton signing off, freerangedogs.com. Take care.
If you like this episode, I invite you to visit our website, freerangedogs.com. It's where you can find the stuff you need to live the free-range dog lifestyle. I want to help you with that. Book a consultation call or an in-person training, attend one of our ongoing events, or join our online membership program. We got it all on freerangedogs.com. All right, it's time to head back to the truck and the water bucket for the thirsty dogs. This is Webb Parton signing off, wishing you the boundless joy that comes when you share the outdoors with your best friend.